Hello, this is Michelle Pacansky-Brock, and this is a brief presentation that I have prepared for my ePortfolio to take you through an overview of some of the highlights from my personal and professional experiences. When I look back at some of the experiences that have really shaped me, I have to acknowledge the fact that I was raised and spent most of my life in California's Silicon Valley, which is the heart of technology and innovation in our fabulous nation. Although I wasn't born there, I moved to the Silicon Valley when I was 2, and I lived there all of my life until I moved away for graduate school in my late 20s or mid 20s. So I think that a lot of the innovation around technology and creativity that was happening around me shaped the way that I think and also the way that I value technology and the role that I see it playing in creativity and helping people to connect and learn globally. In 1999, this was a pretty formative year for me. This was the year that I received my master's degree in art history from UC Riverside. And it was also the year that I married my new husband and best friend, Stan. This was also the year that we moved. We relocated and decided to do so to move somewhere more affordable, which is not something that is so great about the Silicon Valley. And we moved out to an area near Sacramento that is called Rockland. And not soon after that, just the next year after we were married, we had our first child named Jack, who Stan is holding here. And 2 years later, we had our second child, Reese. These are our two little boys who I love dearly and have played huge roles in my life and changed me in many, many ways. Being their parent has been rewarding and challenging all at the same time. In 2002, the same year that Reese was born, and I had Jack at home, I became a full-time art history professor at Sierra College. I left the private sector. I was actually a high-tech recruiter with Cisco Systems, and I moved into higher education to embrace my passion for teaching. And this was a huge change for me, but it was one that I was very committed to and excited about. So that was in 2002 that I made this change, and I do think it's important to acknowledge all that was going on in my personal life. It was a pretty tumultuous time for me, very busy, very stressful, but also, a tremendous time for learning. And as I continued raising my two boys, the challenges continued and the learning opportunities continued as well. They continue to teach me so much about the world, and as I watch them grow up and learn in so many different ways through technology, I often think, are my biggest teachers in the world, because I look to them and I see the ways that they are learning in ways that are so profoundly different from the way that we teach our own students in college. And that's something that I keep close to my heart as I think about moving more and more into leadership in education. When I became a full-time professor of art history, I found myself also very entrenched in this deep shift in technology. I was teaching with color slides, and all of my other colleagues were as well. I was the only full-time art historian, and I found that it was really essential for us to begin this shift from color slides to digital images. And I also began to realize how difficult it was to encourage others to see why it was important to make such a change, even though I could understand the values and how moving from color slides to digital images opened new opportunities for teaching and learning and connecting with our students in new ways. However, that change was not an easy one to make, and I began to realize that change in higher ed is not something that comes easily. The years that followed were extraordinary. Around us, things began to shift so quickly with regards to technology. We're now a decade into the internet, the mainstreaming of the internet. Broadband at home is increasing. And these devices, if you can recall what this is on the screen here, this is an iPod, are popping up everywhere. This is when podcasting was all the rage. Podcasting was incredibly popular around 2005, 2006. This is before the Facebook era. This is also before YouTube. But it is when we're also starting to see people write blogs. It was around this time when I began to realize that I was not so fond of the way that my students were interacting with technology. You could say that I was perhaps becoming aware of my own mental models now that I look back on this experience. I can remember being in my office with one of my students who sat next to me talking, and he had an earbud in his ear and an iPod in his hand, and he was having a conversation with me. And I remember being so distracted by that and thinking, is he actually listening to that as he's speaking with me? And I couldn't get over that. And I, of course, thought it was rude, and that's where I was stuck. But something interesting was about to happen to me. I was about to change in ways that I did not realize. In 2006, I found myself undergoing a rather surprising and unexpected surgery. I needed open heart surgery, and this was obviously a very trying time for me physically and emotionally. And as I recovered from open heart surgery, as many people who go through physical experiences like this one, you find yourself changing in many ways. And I didn't, of course, realize how deep these changes were until many, many years later. Actually, I would say I'm still realizing how deep these changes have been on me. But as I began to recover from open heart surgery, I found myself turning to my iPod and downloading many podcasts onto that iPod as I would walk the neighborhood and as I would walk on my treadmill to regain much of my cardiovascular strength. And why this was important was because I realized that I was learning from the voices of people I've never met. And I was learning from archived conference presentations and workshop presentations that had been shared by people genuinely just out of their open willingness to share and placed online. And these were sessions that I had not been granted the opportunity to go to, and I would never have the opportunity to go to. Now today, as I share this in 2013, maybe that doesn't sound so compelling, but at this time it was absolutely groundbreaking to me to realize that I could learn so much from an iPod, from people who were just willing to share something by placing it online. Suddenly, these earbuds that once symbolized something obtrusive to me transformed, and I began to feel my mental models, these traditional ways of thinking, shift. And I now realized that I was going through a deeper learning process. I was seeing the world differently. And at this point in time, as I found myself with all this extra time on my hands, I decided that it was going to be my place to start to use these technologies to transform my own teaching. This was a huge moment for me, probably bigger than I even realized. And so I turned to these tools and I taught myself how to podcast, and I began to record my lectures from home as I continued to recover from open heart surgery. Also, that following year is when I learned about a tool that I still use a great deal in my own online and classes, and that tool is called VoiceThread. And this tool was profoundly different because it flipped the learning environment, the online learning environment, from being text-centric to visually centric. And it allowed me and my students the opportunity to share asynchronously in voice or video, not just text. So now we could hear each other's emotion, each other's passion, each other's curiosities, each other's frustrations and confusion there in our conversations online, and not have to guess what each other was thinking and feeling as we read our text comments. Again, this time for me was profoundly curious and rather playful and creative. This same year, I was the recipient of 2 significant awards. I received the Sloan C. Excellence Award for Outstanding Online Instructor, and I received a NISOT Award for Teaching Excellence. And these were really moments for myself that I was very proud of, and I'm still very proud of. Beyond that, though, they sought me to look deeply inside and reflect on what was happening. And I began to ask myself if there was more happening here, and if there was something I should be doing with these changes, if I should be sharing more profoundly, more deeply, if I was really in the right place, if I should be doing something different with my career. I found myself changing in ways that I couldn't really put my arms around. And the more I changed, the less like the others in my organization I became. And while the change felt fabulous at first, it became more difficult over time because I was becoming more and more different from my peers and shifting away from the strategic goals and support structures of my organization. And I realized that those issues were causing some strife for me. Yet I was driven by this passion, by this need to really share the ways that I was improving my teaching and the feedback I was getting from my students. And in 2009, 7 years after starting my full-time teaching experience as a professor, I chose to resign. And I left my position and I started down a new pathway. And I'm still on that same pathway 4 years later. There's days when I wake up and I don't know what the day is going to bring, and parts of me love that, and parts of me sometimes feel scared and I don't know what's to come next. Over the 4 years between 2009 and 2013, I have engaged in a variety of different positions. I have taken on 2 different full-time positions. One as a director at CSU East Bay and another as a director at Academic Partnerships. Both of those positions were not the right fit for me, and I did choose to leave after a short period of time. Throughout the last 2 years, I've been teaching part-time at a community college online, which I love and I plan to continue to do. And I am now again back doing independent consulting work for colleges and universities, and I really enjoy that as well. So I continue down this path trying to figure out where I fit. And one thing that has struck me as something very important is the realization that leadership is not about titles, positions, or flowcharts. It's about one life influencing another, and that's something that I have learned through my personal and professional experiences. And it's one of the reasons why I remain committed to being very active in social media. It allows me to influence other people in ways that traditional positions do not. And with that, I am truly excited and proud to add my EdD from Capella University to my personal and professional accomplishments. And I look forward to what the future brings.